Man skjønte at man kunne ikke bare overlate det forretningen og implementere. Vi trengte litt bistand.
Ok, shalom alle sammen. Vi er glad for å kunne ha med oss Israels nye viseambassadør i Norge, Eytan Halon. Hello, Eytan. Good afternoon.
Shalom to everyone.
Let's again bring the sound to the whole system. Now, try again.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yes.
Shalom to everyone.
Shalom. Please, the floor is yours.
All right, so thank you, Conrad, and thank you to MIFF. I am sorry that I couldn't be with you in person this weekend. That was the plan. But I will still, I'm looking forward to my first trip to Stavanger. It won't be hopefully too long, and I look forward to meeting you there on the next occasion. So my name is Eytan Halon. I am the new chargé d'affaires, head of the Israeli embassy in Oslo. I arrived 3 months ago in the middle of August. I was told two things before I came to Oslo. The first is that Norway is the most challenging place to be, probably the most challenging place to be an Israeli diplomat today. But at the same time, they told me it's also probably the most beautiful country that you can serve in as an Israeli diplomat. So we try and find the balance between work and life. And together with I'm here with my wife and my 8-month-old daughter. We will ensure that we find the right balance between the challenging work, but also enjoying everything that Norway has to offer. So that's our plan for the next 3 years. But it's good to be in Norway, and I just arrived in Norway after 3 years in Shanghai in China, and I suppose there are a few places with such a stark difference and contrast. You know, Shanghai, China, city with 27 million people, takes about 2 hours by car to go from one side of the city to the other. Here in Oslo, I actually really enjoyed it. I can basically walk from every single place to another place, and that we enjoy. So it's good to speak to you, at least digitally. And usually I would finish my talks or my speeches by saying thank you, but I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to MIFF, and thank you to everybody who is attending. You know, the political situation here in Norway is difficult. I don't really need to explain that to you, but we are deeply aware of the support and the great level of support that there is for Israel within the Norwegian population. It's not always clear. It's not always easy to see in the media. It's not always easy to see in politics and what we see on TV here in Norway or even in Israel. When we talk about Norway, we talk about how Norway is a very hostile country towards Israel, but in reality, we know that there is a huge amount of support within Norway for Israel, and we are deeply appreciative of that, especially within these last 2 years, when these last 2 years have been really tough, really difficult for Israel, for the Israeli people, and for all those that support and stand by Israel throughout these difficult times. So I said, I've been here for 3 months. It's been an interesting introduction to Israel in Norway. I arrived on August the 10th, and I think on either August the 11th or the 12th, the oil fund announced that it would be withdrawing its first round of investments from Israel. That was an interesting interesting introduction to Norwegian politics when it comes to Israel. And then a couple of weeks after that, we had well, there were more withdrawals of investments, and we had the Norway-Israel football match, which also kept us busy. And although there were protests outside and quite violent protests outside, we were delighted to see that ultimately it passed by peacefully, and all the players and all the Israeli fans came into the stadium safely. The match went by peacefully and safely, and everybody left safely. And at the end, everyone was talking about football and not politics, and how Norway has taken another step closer to the World Cup. And I look forward to enjoying that with you all in the summer of 2026. I know it's not certain more match, but I have no doubt. So since then, we've been working, trying to do what we can in difficult circumstances in a difficult place to bring Israel's voice where possible to the table. Since the elections, we've been meeting as many politicians as possible. It's not easy across the spectrum. There are parties which are more willing to meet and parties which are less willing to meet. But I will come back to why I think it is so critical, especially at this time, that we have a conversation, an open conversation, and a constructive conversation with as many people, with as many decision makers as possible. And the reason for that is, well, as I speak to you, these are critical days. These are critical days in Israel and critical days in the Middle East. Today, we are several weeks on from the ceasefire agreement that was brought together by the Trump administration in the United States. A 20-point plan with a lot of headlines, but initially quite few details. As we said from the start of the war, from October the 7th, and for the last 2 years, this horrible war in Gaza can come to an end under two conditions, and those two conditions were clear from the start: the release of the hostages and Hamas giving up their weapons and never posing a threat to the communities of Israel again. Now, this agreement, amongst the 20 points, demands the release of the hostages and the demilitarization of Hamas in Gaza. That was what we demanded throughout these 2 years. And as soon as that agreement was put in place, the war, for now, come to an end. But the future of that war depends on the implementation of that agreement. We've seen, and it's not surprising to us, that Hamas is doing its best to remain in place, remain in power in Gaza, and it will do everything that it can in its cynical... Look, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It was a terrorist organization. It is a terrorist organization. It will remain a terrorist organization as long as it remains in power. And that's what we're seeing today. With very little power, what it has left today, Hamas is a shadow of what it was. It's a guerrilla fighting force rather than an army, but it still has some leadership. And we have seen with the constantly delayed release of the bodies of the remaining hostages that it is still playing games. It is not interested in going away quietly. And as we and the Americans have said, since the signing of the agreement, we prefer to do this diplomatically. The goal is clear. The plan has to be implemented, and it has been backed by countries, not just Israel and the United States, across the Arab world, across Europe. It has to be implemented. We would prefer to do it diplomatically. If it can't be done diplomatically, then we will have to sit down with the Americans again and the other countries that are involved and see how we do this by force. But the preference always has been and always will be to do this diplomatically. Will Hamas go away that easily? It's going to require an international effort to make sure that all those 20 points of the plan are implemented successfully. Today, we still have 11 bodies of hostages in Gaza. There are rumors that 3 more bodies will be returned to Israel this evening. That's what Hamas announced just about 30 minutes, an hour ago. But we've seen repeatedly that they have either returned bodies that don't belong to hostages or remains that don't belong to hostages. And until that identification process has been completed, we cannot be sure. But I hope that by tomorrow morning we'll be talking about 8 hostages rather than 11 hostages. But we have to remember who we are fighting. So the last 2 years, starting October the 7th, 2023, have been incredibly difficult for the state of Israel and for its supporters all over the world. But the Middle East today, 2 years on, or just over 2 years on, is a very different place to the Middle East on October the 6th, 2023. Israel fought militarily on 7 different fronts. We all know about Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran against the Iranian regime, and the threat of a nuclear weapon, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and also an increase in terrorist attacks from the West Bank. Now, 2 years after the start of the war, the Middle East is a completely different place to the one that it was. Hamas has been severely weakened. The Hezbollah, whilst it's trying to, in recent days, it's trying to rearm and become stronger again. Hezbollah was weakened, is a real shadow of itself. And the Lebanese army and Lebanese government is reclaiming sovereignty over the south of Lebanon, which is great news both for the Lebanese and also for the citizens of the north of Israel. Syria didn't attack us, but the Syrian regime fell after Hezbollah was weakened significantly, and Assad is no more. But we still have to be cautious about the new leader of Syria and be aware that not every single person who puts on a suit and tie is necessarily a peace-seeking leader. And we have to make sure that the minorities in Syria, especially a very strong connection to the Druze minority in Syria, and we have to make sure they are protected and their right to look after by the new regime. So we have to be cautious. Iran, the nuclear regime, has been destroyed or very severely damaged to the point where there is no real nuclear program, and we have to be certain that we prevent any sort of renewed effort to reach a nuclear bomb. I suppose that's probably easier nowadays, considering during the campaign, Israel took out the air defense of Iran, and Iran is vulnerable to attack. And us and the Americans have repeatedly said that should Iran seek to re-establish its nuclear program, then we reserve the right and we will take action to prevent it. In Yemen, the Houthis, their leadership and infrastructure has been more or less eliminated, and there too, the Houthis are not what they were. I think all this comes to show, well, there are 2 things. Firstly, that the key actor and the one that's pulling all the strings in everything that's been happening around the Middle East is Iran, and the Iranians have been weakened significantly. I remember when serving in the army myself, we were told one of the scariest things, or one of the most the greatest threats, that if we were to attack the Iranian nuclear program, it would be the response from Hezbollah from Lebanon, their key proxy in the region. One of their proxies, but really what was the strongest proxy. Their reaction and their retaliation would be massive. I think the proof of the change in the Middle East is that when we attacked Iran and we took out the nuclear program together with the Americans, not one rocket was fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon to Israel. So the Middle East has changed beyond recognition. I think it's a safer Middle East. The axis of evil, if you want to call it, or the regimes and the organizations that seek to destabilize the Middle East have been severely weakened or destroyed. So we're looking at a very different Middle East, and that is good news. It's good news for the civilians of the Middle East, both in Israel and the Arab world. it also gives us the opportunity to continue the momentum that was started before the war with the Abraham Accords, with the normalization of relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. The momentum is continuing and will continue. And hopefully we will soon see more normalization agreements with additional countries. I think it's inevitable. That was the direction we were going in, and that momentum has been slowed down, but I don't think stopped. Only a few months ago, Israel signed its largest ever energy export deal with Egypt, worth $35 billion of natural gas. Israel being a major energy exporter in the Middle East is not something that any of us knew or could have imagined a few decades ago. But today, Israel is exporting tens of billions of dollars of natural gas and natural energy to Egypt and then to Europe. So that is a real change, and that was signed during the war before the ceasefire agreement. So the momentum is there. Those who are interested in a future peaceful relations are engaged and will continue to move towards that. And I think it's critical that any country that wants to be involved and influential in the future of the Middle East and contribute to the day after in Gaza and in the Middle East, I would count Norway among those, needs to recognize the new Middle East and the changes that have happened in the Middle East in the past 2 years, and that really the future of the Middle East belongs to those who embrace diplomatic relations, economic relations, people-to-people relations, and that really is vital. So to really be involved in the Middle East in the future, firstly, you have to recognize that a lot has changed in the last 2 years, and some countries are there, and some countries are 7 military fronts, more or less. But of course, it's important for me also to add, and I'll conclude with this, and then we'll open to questions, is that those were the 7 military fronts, but I would identify 2 further fronts. One additional front is the media front, and that's something that we've been trying to fight for the last 2 years. I know MIFF is very involved in let's say the media front in Norway and in the Nordics. It's very tough to ensure that Israel's narrative, it's not just a narrative, ultimately it's the fact. It's about providing the necessary information to the population. It's very hard for Israel's case to be heard fairly when fighting organizations and countries which have a huge media, really infrastructure or ecosystem. Whatever Hamas says gets pushed out by the Arab media, led by Al Jazeera, financed by Qatar. I was reading something about the complaint that sometimes Israel has bad public relations. And the bottom line of this article was that no, Israel doesn't have bad public relations. It's a question of how much PR you can buy. And in the case of Hamas and its supporters, they have bought a lot of PR, a lot of advertising space over the years. And we saw that culminating in the propaganda effort over the last 2 years. And the final front, and I know that the final front is the front. It is the war that the Jewish communities face around the world, including here in Norway. The Jewish communities, as I'm sure you know, when there's an escalation of violence in the Middle East, there's also an escalation in anti-Semitism, an increase in anti-Semitism across the world. We saw it just a few weeks ago in Manchester with the terror attack on the synagogue there on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, and that's the city in which I grew up. And I know here the Norwegian Jewish community is very thankful for the efforts of its allies, including MIFF, for trying to protect the Jewish community here from what is a really difficult atmosphere outside. So I can say on behalf of the Israeli embassy, and also echoing what I've heard from the Jewish community, thank you for all your efforts and support. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Eytan. I hope you can hear the digital applause. Thanks for your update. There was a question that was raised to the previous lecturers, but that we didn't have the time to cover. You touched upon it, but how do you see now the future within the next 2 or 3 years in Gaza?
It's a good question. Hamas has been militarily defeated, but it hasn't gone away. The first task, or the first tasks of Israel, together with this international coalition that stands behind the deal, is to ensure, firstly, that all the hostages are released. Every single one of these remaining 11 are released. And then to ensure that Hamas does not retain or regain the leadership and control of the Gaza Strip. Only after that happens can we really start talking about a peaceful future. I think there's a lot of wishful thinking in the world that somehow the ceasefire will be different, but it will only be different if Hamas does not exist. That a ceasefire with Hamas in power is inevitably and always will be temporary. It may take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But Hamas have not been put off by the last 2 years. Rather, for Hamas, this has been a fantastic success. No matter how many of its civilians and infrastructure it sacrifices along the way. That's its strategy, after all. So, to talk about what will be in the next 2 years or 3 years, firstly, the first task is to ensure that Hamas is not in control of what happens in Gaza for the next 2 or 3 years. After that, if Gaza will be led by whether it's a technocratic government or another government, but a government that cares for the wishes of the people of Gaza more than it does care for the death of Israelis and Jews, then we may have some room for optimism, and the reconstruction and rebuilding can begin. But the difference here, unlike in after previous wars, all launched by Hamas, and all resulting in severe damage to the Gaza Strip, is that when the international aid and the humanitarian aid and the concrete starts flowing once again into Gaza, every country that sends aid into Gaza has to make sure that it knows where it's going. It has to be conditional. It has to be conditional on the fact that it reaches the right hands. It has to be conditional that the concrete that flows into Gaza is used to build buildings above ground, not to build tunnels underground. And to make sure that the aid that goes to the people of Gaza goes to the people of Gaza and isn't taken by Hamas. So that's critical, and I think there is a commitment and determination from the international community that this was the fight. This was the last war with Hamas. We can't afford to have another one. It is too devastating to both the Israelis and the Palestinians to have another war of this kind. But it starts with making sure that Hamas does not have its hands on everything that comes into Gaza, and this is no longer controlling the people of Gaza. If we reach that situation again, then we'll find ourselves, I don't know how many years down the line, but we'll find ourselves in the same situation. And therefore, we cannot fall into this trap of wishful thinking and thinking, well, something will be different next time, because Hamas doesn't think like that. Hamas is only interested in another October the 7th, again and again and again. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thanks. Thanks. In the Sharm el-Sheikh summit a few weeks ago, Turkey signed a document where they actually said something that they agreed to work for to have Israel integrated in the region, or for profitable involvement. But Israel rejects Turkish forces into Gaza. How do you see the relations to Turkey developing in the next few years?
Well, I have to be, it's very difficult. I think anybody who says that they know that they can confidently predict what will happen in the Middle East in the space of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is I'd question whether you should listen to them. So I don't want to make any, it's difficult to make any confident predictions. The Israel-Turkey relationship has gone up and down, up and down. I won't go into too much into Israeli-Turkish relations, especially with Erdogan at the helm. It's not only Qatar that hosts Hamas leaders, also some Hamas leaders that are hiding in Turkey. I think today they don't. I think Hamas leaders all over the world, I don't think they go out too much. It's a dangerous profession to have nowadays. But I'll say more broadly, in order to avoid a repeat of what we have seen in Gaza, we need to make sure that the international effort in Gaza is led by countries that not only we can trust, that are reliable, and their interests are clear. And would we want that the two nations playing a large role in Gaza that after are Qatar and Turkey? The answer is probably not, because we know where their allegiances have lied over the years, and we need to make sure that those, whether it's boots on the ground or money or those helping in establishing a new government, they have to be countries that are interested, truly interested in a peaceful future for Gaza and for ensuring that Hamas plays no further. Otherwise, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation. We do not want Hamas to return back physically in Gaza by countries that supported them over the last years, whether it's financially or politically. I saw just whether yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a Hamas delegation meeting with the Turkish foreign minister. Those ties are very close and very well known. So we have to be cautious. Ultimately, the successful day after relies on moderate countries establishing a moderate government there and ensuring that the aid reaches moderate hands. That's the answer I'll give.
Yeah, thanks. And the next question is related to where you just finished there. What is the best solution for the kids in Gaza? How can they be de-radicalized? Can this international peace committee led by Trump, can they teach them to accept the Jewish state as a neighbor?
I think there are several layers, but it starts with education. And one of the key reasons why we think UNRWA can't play a future role in Gaza or in Palestinian society in general is because of the incitement that there exists in Palestinian schools and Palestinian textbooks. It starts from kids learning or not learning that the right thing to do is to eliminate the Jewish state. There has to be a real huge reform and change in the way that Palestinian children are educated in Gaza. Look, one of the things, Israel tried before October the 7th in many ways to reduce the Hamas threat or reduce the threat from Gaza by improving the economy of Gaza, by opening the border or the crossing from Gaza into the Israeli communities in order to enable people to work, to earn more money, and by improving their lives, we hope that will also contribute to the de-radicalization. Everything in hindsight, it's easy to say that this wasn't successful, but it's critical that it starts from children. It starts by making sure that Hamas is not responsible for their education. It's critical to ensure that that children in Gaza have more options, either in the summer when they go to a summer camp, that they don't go to a Hamas summer camp or an Islamic Jihad summer camp. That when they finish school, they strive to go to university and they don't strive to join the Nukhba or the Hamas fighting forces. ultimately you need to give children both an education that they deserve, and you need to make sure they can go on to do things which are free from Hamas and free from terror in the future. It's about giving them opportunities, and I really hope that, and I'm certain that in the rebuilding process, I spoke about aid being conditional, humanitarian aid being conditional upon it reaching the right hands. That means that when the reconstruction happens and children start going back to school in Gaza, and I hope for the children of Gaza that happens as soon as possible, that the education they receive is one that is different to the education that they received before. And they understand, there will be an understanding. I think in the Middle East, you have to be realistic. If we look at the peace agreements that Israel has, we have different types of peace agreements or normalization agreements recently. With Jordan and Egypt, we have decades-long peace agreements. We're not necessarily close allies in the sense that we're not the people of the nations aren't especially, we're not fantastic friends the same way that when I travel to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, we're welcomed very warmly. And I think in Jordan and Egypt, it's more frosty, or it's a kind of cold peace. That's okay. With the people of Gaza, we can settle for something that is a cold peace, or we will settle for it. We will settle for a situation in which the people of Gaza are governed by a government that doesn't seek to destroy us. After that, we can start rebuilding and warming that relation up a little bit. But at the moment, we need to have an entity or a territory on the other side of our border that cares more for its people than it does for the deaths of our own people.
Thanks. One final question. There are around 200 friends of Israel here that are now going back to their homes and to their local groups. Some of them are part of political parties, some of them are part of churches or other groups. What message do you want them to take home from this conference?
So, what I think is critical is really the easiest thing, which is just to talk and to speak up and to speak to people, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's with colleagues, those who have a platform, can use that platform to speak to larger audiences. It's about providing information to people who don't necessarily have it. And one of the real issues here, not just here in Norway, but I see it especially here, is that the information is not the full story doesn't reach the eyes and ears of the public, and therefore it's critical to speak to as many people as possible about what the real situation is on the ground in Israel. Speak about what is the real situation on the ground in the Middle East, and to open people's eyes to what is really going on. Because too often, I think what we see here in Norway and the hostility towards Israel comes out of a lack of knowledge. A lack of knowledge, and it's not always. I don't think it's necessarily the fault of those people who think like that, but rather they don't have the let's be very clear. If you watch and read NRK every evening, and you read what's written on their website every day, then you are unlikely to have a balanced view of what's going on in Israel today. I had a meeting with the foreign editor of NRK just a couple of days ago. I told him exactly what I thought, and I said, isn't it strange that for the last 3 months, since I've been here at least, I have not received one request for an interview from NRK. So my suspicion is you are not providing both sides of the story. Now we will see together whether over the coming weeks and coming months I become a regular guest in the studio of NRK. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. So what I'm saying is, in the absence of that information and that balance, the best thing that you can do is to provide that balance where it's possible. To speak with friends, colleagues, family members, continue your support for MIFF and the important work that it does, because that way we're able to get the voice and the narrative and the information and the truth out. So that is my request. Just speak to people. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Eytan. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone.
Okay, bye, Litteraat.
Bye.
Yep.